biggest news that came out in the last couple of days, Jason, I think definitely was the combination of X and xAI. Two private companies, one social media, less talked about category for startups in the last, 10 years. And then, of course, the other hand is the AI company, which is all we've been talking about for a while. An important thing to keep in mind here is how the companies were already operating almost as a conjoined entity. I mean, having Grok on X makes perfect sense if you think about them both from the perspective of Musk, but they were distinct companies. So to see that kind of tight integration, super interesting. Clearly, xAI wants a distribution mechanism and a data source. X supplies both.
So this is another interesting wrinkle in all of this. If the other thing to look at is the downside. If you don't do this, what's the impact on both companies? Meta now has an AI search box. So if you're using Instagram or Facebook, they kind of force you to use it even if you don't want to.
Yep.
So then that means for xAI, Claude, any other independent language model, if you don't have a social network to feed you real-time news, you're at a disadvantage.
I mean, this is, I hate to keep bringing up the same couple of talks from the Liquidity Summit last April, but I think it was Antonio Gracias who said, look, X has a unique data source in the world. That's why his company was backing xAI. And so I do think that X by itself had a relatively low ceiling for how much it could become worth, because I think Snap's trading at something like 3 times sales, Jason, going back to your price sales ratios. But AI companies can be valued at bajillions of dollars. So there's a lot of good stuff here. I'm curious to see how much enterprise adoption Grok gets, because when we think about the leading model companies in the US, Grok's models are often up towards the top of, LLM Arena and all those other ranking lists, but I don't hear about as many companies using them in production, Jason.
So I don't know that they have really pushed their enterprise efforts. I think that's something that maybe ChatGPT has been way ahead of, since Sam worked with the startup community at YC and comes from that sort of space. So
it's a $33 billion deal, essentially, for X, which means that it has surpassed the $32 billion that Wiz sold for, bringing us another pretty enormous deal. Sure, it's all stock. Sure, it's Elon's companies. But I don't know. We wanted more M&A. We wanted to see more dollars in flight. Well, here you go.
Yeah, I retweeted. I saw somebody had a chart about M&A so far this year. And let's see if I can find it here.
It was Sheil Monhat, I believe. I'll pull it up for us.
Yeah. And so I just took it from him, which I guess is from CB Insights or Charter. And we're at 54 billion for Q1. Last Q1, we were at 2 or 3 billion. Q1 before that, 2 or 3 billion. Q1 before that, we must have had something big in 2022. That was 38 billion. So, this chart kind of speaks volumes. We're going to have, at least in the last 4 years, a record first quarter by, looks like 50% almost. So this is trouncing 23 and 24 and greatly exceeding 21 and 22.
Yeah, I think the important thing to keep here is that, sure, it's fun to see the X deal be worth slightly more than the Wiz sale, but the Wiz deal was a pure startup play. It was a venture-backed upstart company from the Israeli tech scene that had a lot of, private capital into it. You love to see it. Whereas X had also some Saudi money, and it was slightly less venture and more private market. So I think the Wiz deal is full. We should just take all of it as a yes in that chart. So I love that data point. Yeah. Enough, Jason, to actually change the tune amongst venture capitalists regarding liquidity, or just a good taste to start the feast?
There were a lot of VCs in X.com, I believe, Sequoia and some other ones, Joe Lonsdale. So they're all going to be now in xAI. I think that's a nice update to send to your LPs. So in a private market transaction, being able to say hey, look, we had a social media investment that's now an AI plus social media investment. That's awesome. What this also does for freedom of speech and, all the challenges that X has had with advertising, this now eliminates that business model because you have the business model of people paying $20 or $30 a month for Grok. So this is one of the, if you double click on this a bit, one of the great things that could come out of the large language model era of consumers paying $20, $30, $40 a month, and executives paying that amount for a large language model, is some amount of that could go towards content creation and will. So we've already had the, people who are doing reinforcement training, but now why not just buy the New York Times? Why not buy the New York Post? Why not buy Vox? There is actually a viable future for content if you can get a language model to say, you know what, hiring 30 journalists to work on TechCrunch and feeding that into the LLM. Okay, that's only $5 million a year for the whole group and their office space or whatever.
Yeah.
Seems de minimis to me. So content as a front for LLMs is a really interesting idea. What if like TechCrunch were to break even while feeding? If you bought the Vox, collection of sites or Penske's collection of sites, all of those collections of sites could actually wind up being worth something to a large language model.